Amid all the COVID-19 news, of course, today the provincial government was supposed to release its entire provincial budget. Of course, that didn't happen entirely, and it's been an interesting day. Jim Farney joins me now from the University of Regina. Politics is your specialty. We've talked last during the federal election. Things have changed a tad.
A lot, and very fast. Yeah, and even in the last month, they've changed a lot.
In your memory, can you think of a time where a provincial government releases a quote-unquote budget on the same day they declare a state of emergency?
I've never heard of it. I think this is even more kind of emergency situation than the first couple of Romano budgets. I think given the broader context, you'd have to go back to the outbreak of war in 1939, which happened in the fall. So we had budgets and then changed them. It's that type of circumstance now.
So what do you make of the expense report that we've seen?
I think it's really important. I know it's been criticized some, but essentially what the government did today was guarantee we will continue spending as we had planned and we'll borrow if necessary to do that. We often forget the budget covers something like 163 different entities or ministries or subparts of government. Some of those will be hugely affected by changes in health, or closing the schools down, but most of them won't. And so to say both to the economy and to people who are dependent on government services, you can assume things will be as stable as they can be going forward is a really important message.
What are the optics of releasing anything at all versus just saying, we're not going to do this till this is over?
Different provinces are doing different things, right? They're coming up with different answers to that question. I think it's really hard for a government to stand up and say, we don't know how to model revenue, and so we're not doing a budget. That promise we have to have a balanced budget is out the window because we just don't know what type of revenue we're going to be bringing in, and it looks bad. I think the job of governments at times like this, though, is to provide as much certainty and as many guarantees to people as they can, and I think at least saying we'll keep expenditures constant for the next 12 months is an important piece of stability.
What would you say your biggest piece of criticism is of this?
Unlike some other provincial governments, they don't yet have a number as to how much they'll spend to kind of, not just around the medical care for COVID-19, but around help for people who are essentially off work. There's some stuff in the state of emergency release they brought out today, delayed in payments on the crowns and stuff. But Ontario, for example, or the federal government this morning said, we are going to spend X amount as stimulus. That's not really in the expenditure package. There's some infrastructure spending that they're calling stimulus, but that was planned anyway. So we don't know quite how much they're going to roll out to try and offset this to, I'm thinking of waitresses and waiters, for example, who are just not going to be working. We don't really know what the provincial piece of help for them is going to be.
How does this compare, politically speaking, compared to more recent pandemics like H1N1?
The difference this time is we're essentially shutting the economy down. So the other comparison would be the 2008-2009 financial crisis, which Saskatchewan got through pretty well. But if you think of parts of Europe that were really, it fundamentally changed their economies, this is somewhere, more like that than what we had with H1N1 or SARS.
Going forward, what should the average political watcher, news watcher be looking for when it comes to government and the opposition in the days ahead?
One big question is how much will there be to watch? I mean, how is the ledge going to function with the restrictions on, no more than 50 people gathering? And, once you bring in emergency powers, I think the big thing is how does the province and the federal government work together? We've had 2 years of very adversarial relationships. The really important monetary and fiscal policy levers are in the Bank of Canada and in the federal government. The province can do a lot, but it's going to have to do it in cooperation with its neighbors and the feds, and how that relationship works in this type of moment is really important.
I know that we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know that we're actually going to have an election come October, but if that's the case, would the election be a referendum on how the Sask Party handles this?
I think at this point, yeah, we would have to read it that way, that it becomes, and some of that depends too. I mean, the NDP is led by a public health expert, and he's certainly been very vocal in his criticism so far. At some point, there becomes a dance where the government leans on the chief medical officer and the opposition is doing its own thing, and people will have to make up their minds about that story. Much of that depends on how the response rolls out in the next 10 days.
Thanks so much for this.
Thanks, Sam.